Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for, it's a real honor actually to have you on. You know, this case I consider one of the very best cases out there with all the witnesses. And so I have a number of questions for you, but in your own words, I'd love to hear directly from a witness like you. Are you having trouble with your phone?
I am. I'm
You,
sorry. I'm
it's a,
going to try and hold it as steady as I can. It was great earlier, but now I'm kind of moving it. So I apologize.
okay, no problem. So can you tell, you know, you probably everyone had different vantage points when things were happening in the beginning. I heard somewhere there was flashes of light first. Did you see that?
Yes. My first sort of experience in the experience itself was seeing flashing lights in the distance. Uh, I don't know if you are very familiar, but the school that I attended is very rural. So it used to be a farm, so there's a lot of open space.
Hmm.
And so our playground was essentially just not dirt, but kind of dirt. I don't know if that's how it is now, but that it was a very, very big space of um, of land, and then the boundary of that playground were essentially the trunks of trees, and beyond that was bush, very tall grass, savanna region, lots of trees, lots of koppies. It wasn't mountainous per se, but they were, little koppies, sort of smaller hills, and that's where the flashes that I saw were.
Now, did everyone around you like say, "Hey, what's that? What's going on?" And did you all start talking to each other like, "What's happening?"
Yeah, I mean, initially, what what it was it's kind of, you start to question yourself. It's like, okay, did I see that? And then there were a few of the people who were pointing in the same direction where the flashing lights or the flashes were coming from. And so we all sort of gathered and looked at each other and said, did you see that? And kind of corroborated each other's stories like, yeah, I saw that. What does it look like? It looks like flashing lights. But it started off very slowly in that most of us, weren't sure exactly what we had seen. And so we kind of just like, okay, did I see that? Didn't I see that? But then when a few of us kind of clustered together, we we realized that we were all seeing the same thing.
Now, there was one little girl that was interviewed by Dr. Mack that said she heard a sound, and when he asked her what the sound was, she said it was like someone was blowing into a flute. Did you happen to hear any sound?
I did not hear any sound.
Hmm.
I would say the most, I mean, other than the entire thing being almost like an out of body experience,
Yeah.
time seemed to be the really kind of odd thing that stuck out, in that it seemed like it had slowed down immensely. I had
Really?
no
Wow.
concept of time. Yeah, I
Wow.
had no concept of time from the time that I had seen the flashing lights to the time that I saw the being to when I let go of my friend Emma's hand. I do not know how much time went by. It seemed like everything was moving really slowly
Isn't that
for me.
interesting? You know, that's what a lot of people say during a car accident, everything like moves really slowly. It seems to. Now, when there was only, I know there was only one adult. There was a parent that was in a tuck shop, I guess it was called. Um,
Yes.
but no, and I don't even know what that is. But
Oh, a tuck shop is like it's what we have on our school premises where you sell candy and fruit and soda.
uh,
So we don't have cafeterias. We have, unless you go to boarding school, which I did in high school, so you'd have a cafeteria. But the tuck shop is really where you can buy all your treats. So lots of
yeah.
chocolates and all of that. That's
Oh
where
boy.
that's where the
Yeah.
only adult was on the playground. Yes.
Yeah. And was that unusual? You know, I always wonder why there weren't teachers out among the children. Usually in most schools, when they go out to recess or something like that, the children go out with a teacher or two. So was it unusual that there wasn't
Yes.
a teacher?
Incredibly. And it was only because the teachers were having a staff meeting that particular day.
What timing? Huh?
So
Yeah.
They were all in their staff meeting, and break was a little bit longer than usual, which we loved. And it was a Friday, so that was even better. And us as grade sixes we were the oldest ones on the playground because the grade sevens were taking an exam, because we have grade 7 exams, end of year exams. And so we were kind of manning the playground, and I remember certainly feeling like, yeah, we're the oldest ones on the playground, as you do,
Yeah.
at recess. But yes, there was one teacher in the tuck shop. I actually completely forgot about that. The tuck shop was located in an area where the younger children played. So the playground was essentially one big play area, if you can think of it. But the younger kids from grade 1 to about grade 4 had their own section. It wasn't separated, but they just had their own section that had swings and, was kind of just their area that they played in.
Wow. Okay, so let's continue on to, you saw the flashes, and it was over to this area where you were not allowed to go in. I know there were like a lot of trees. It was hard to get through. And so was there actually a fence there in front of this area you weren't supposed to go?
No, there was no fence. What it was literal tree trunks as the boundary of the playground. So if you can think of big eucalyptus trees, the trunks of those trees were what separated our playground from, where we were not supposed to go beyond. But there was no fence. The rest of that was just open area, open bush. You could see as far as the eye would allow you beyond that. So there was no obstruction, really, other than those tree trunks.
Yeah, one of the witnesses said that it appeared to go like along, I don't want to say a power line or some type of...
Oh, I see. Yeah, I didn't see that, but there was a weird like buzz or hum that, again, I couldn't make too much sense of, because I just didn't know. Sometimes electric lines buzz, but it was a very, very loud buzz. And then also, given this whole time thing, I just wasn't sure if I was imagining it or what was going on. Like, I didn't really know what to make of it, but I did not see anything particularly near the power line. I do know that I definitely felt the buzz, a lot of buzz.
Yeah. Now, were you and your fellow schoolmates, were you drawn toward this area? I mean, did you all start like flowing down toward it to see what was going on?
We did. We did eventually, and it was right by, the logs, as we would call them. And we could sit on these logs sometimes and eat our lunch, which is what we would do. But we stood there and kind of just congregated, a few of us, and looked in the area where both the flashing lights were and wherever this buzzing sound was coming from the electric poles. And, if I saw what I called the being, or a being, that was maybe about 3 to 4 feet away from me, but it didn't cross over the boundary of the tree trunks. Never.
Mm-hmm. What about on top of the craft? And did you think there were actually 2 beings, or was it, or one that showed up twice?
So, that I don't know. I think that's a question that I may never know, but it's definitely a question I've asked myself since the experience, because I honestly couldn't tell you. If they were 2, they were identical. There was no difference between the 2. If they were in fact 2, I have no idea.
Now, what about, I saw some of the pictures that were drawn, and some of them it showed with, or one at least showed with long hair, and others showed no hair at all. What do you remember seeing?
I remember seeing one that did not have hair. Mine did not have no facial hair, I couldn't tell if there was body hair, because it was in the closest thing I can describe it as being in like a scuba diving suit, which I think is what I described it as when I was 11, because that was what I knew. That was like the closest thing I could relate it to. But I don't recall it did not have any hair, no facial hair, no hair in its head, nothing. almost skin was almost like porcelain, really.
Really? And was it like almost like a white color?
Yes. Well,
Like a porcelain white?
yeah, like yes, almost like a nude kind of porcelain kind of color is what I could best describe it. I think I said porcelain in that it just looked completely perfect. There was
Mm.
no blemish, there was no nothing. It just was so smooth, and it almost looked yeah, I think porcelain is just it's very firm, it's stiff, it's kind of stoic. Like, so if you were to
Mhm.
think of a statue, you know, I would be like, okay, it's kind of like a porcelain statue.
Oh,
Except that this being was moving, but there was no, you know, the expression on its face was not one that I really understood. There was no smile, there was no frown, you know, there were not there was no facial recognition for me to comprehend at that time.
wow. Now, what about your mother? Did she believe you right off the bat?
Yes, she did. My mom
Well,
did.
this is
I was I was surprised, but happy. Like I was happy that she was open-minded enough to believe in me. Like she believed in me. And that
mhm.
was what was the most important. And because I took a while to tell my parents.
Going back to the encounter itself. Did you actually do you think you actually made eye contact with this being, whatever it was?
Yes, I did. I know I did. The drawing that I was able to sketch was the exact thing that I saw, and I it was this like we locked eyes. I again don't know for how long, but I definitely looked at this being dead in the eye.
Wow. And um, what did you feel when you did that? I mean, you said you weren't afraid, but was it still just a curiosity at that time? Or did you feel, I know some people feel as though they got a message of some type. Did you have
Right.
any?
I did not have a message. If I do, I don't know what that message is. It hasn't
Mhm.
fully computed, maybe. But it was very, it was not calming. I don't quite know how to describe it, but it was like nothing I've ever felt before. There was no fear. It was just almost as though this being was looking into my soul, like it knew me, like it
Wow.
knew who I was. That is the best that I can describe this sort of like interlocking of eyes for however long it was. But I was with my friend Emma at the time, and the moment I walked away from her, because I had a younger brother and sister also on the playground, because I was worried about them, the moment I walked away from her, I didn't see the being again. And, you know, I stopped, dropped the gaze and walked away and checked on my siblings. And that was my experience. That was sort of the extent of my experience.
Now, when you made eye contact, did you feel there was an intelligence?
I don't know if I knew I would even have known what that was at that time.
Mm. Mhm.
To
Yeah.
be honest, I don't know. I felt I felt like this thing knew me, knew some things about me, knew some things about a lot of things, if that makes sense. And I think I told that to my mom one time when she asked me, like, what do what do you think the point of this was? And I said, I don't know. I think I'm supposed to know some. I think that these things came because they know a lot of things about the earth and they're trying to tell us some things. They know some things, but I don't know what those things are. And at
Mm.
11, you know, I remember her looking at me like, okay, that's it's quite existential. But I mean, I didn't know what that was. I had no idea. And I think that that's something I'm still discovering. I don't
Uh-huh.
believe I have any one answer.
Yeah.
It's something that unravels with each day, with each year. The more that I talk about it, the more clarity I get. So I have Randall to thank for that because I didn't for a very, very long time.
Yes. Yeah, I totally get that. I've talked to people like Travis Walton. I'm sure you've heard his name
Yes,
before.
yes,
And there
I
was a long
actually have
time.
met him. Yeah,
Oh, there was a long time he just didn't even want to deal with it or talk about it or think about it.
yes, yes.
One of the girls that Dr. Mack interviewed, every time I see that clip, I get goosebumps. And that is, she says, he asked, what do you think they wanted? Or I'm not sure exactly what his question was, but she looks back at him and like they were interested. She says it like they were interested. And for some
Yes.
reason, that just gives me goosebumps. Like, again, it's almost like she's describing them looking into her.
Yes, yes, absolutely. It was very unique. You know, you mentioned you posed the analogy of like when you have a car accident, time slows down. Well, I didn't have a car accident, but I was hit by a truck a number of years, like 4 years prior to this experience, and that's how it felt for me. So that's kind of just crazy that you mentioned that, and that's not really something a lot of people know about me. I don't know if the two are interrelated. I have no idea. They maybe are not, but I've always felt that it's something that I can add to the experience of who I am. And there's a reason why I experienced both those things.
Yeah.
Whether they're related or not.
I do want to talk to you how your life has been going and all that, but a couple of things first. And that is, how do you feel when people are trying to like debunk the whole thing? Or first of all, I want to ask you, in the beginning, right after this happened, did anyone try to talk you out of what you saw?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, almost everybody.
Really?
My parents didn't. Yeah, my parents didn't. And of course, people who interviewed us, there were very few people that I actually felt comfortable enough with there were few people that I felt actually were genuinely interested in what we had experienced rather than just having a news story, if that makes sense. And even at 11, you can tell like people who are just like there to just talk to you and, okay, what did you see? Sort of going through the general questions. What did you see? What did you hear? You know, there were some people who were a lot more in depth, like Dr. Mack, and a few other people. I think there was an interview, a journalist from BBC who was different too, just in the approach. And so I didn't always feel that people really, even journalists and professionals or quote experts at the time, really believed in what we had seen. And there were a lot of people who tried to debunk that, a lot. So that had a lot to do with why I just didn't talk about it.
Does it upset you now? Because I know I've done a little research ahead of this show, and there are people out there, of course, calling it a hoax. And like,
Yes.
and I laugh at that because, I can't imagine school children putting together such an elaborate hoax. It's ridiculous.
And school children, Martin, in a Southern African country with no internet, very few people having cable, have no outside or very little, not no, but very limited access to outside influence about what UFOs are or could be or whatever. Like, yeah, we had nothing else to do but come up with this hoax. These, 11-year-old children in Zimbabwe coming up with this. I'm like, no, it doesn't upset me. It used to. But I think that as I've gotten older, I have realized that there's obviously a reason why Randall found me so many years later. He literally did like track me down in Chicago. Took some time for me to actually believe him and like respond to him because I thought it was a joke. But connecting with him means that I've been able to reconnect with my experience. And so with that comes a whole bunch of other things, of understanding of what that experience could mean. And I don't pretend to have an answer now, nor will I tomorrow, but I think over the course of my life, I absolutely will. It also has encouraged me to speak out about what I have seen because I believe in what I saw. And I thought, well, suppressing it indicates that I don't believe in what I saw, regardless of what everybody else thinks or may think.
You have described the being or beings, whichever they were, but what about the craft itself? Can you describe that? Or did you even pay attention to that with the being there?
The being was what I remember most, if I'm being honest. The craft, I do remember drawing a craft, so I remember seeing some part of it. I don't even know the extent of what I saw. in terms of size. But I would say maybe it was silver-esque in color, maybe sort of like disc shaped ish. But it was a type of metal or fabrication that I'd never seen before. And my dad is a steel fabricator, so I could say that's steel, that's, you know, that's aluminum or whatever, but I had never seen anything like that before, so I have no idea what it was. It was completely unusual. And I say silver-esque because it wasn't quite silver, but it's the closest thing I could link it to.
Do you remember any type of seams or anything like that, or did it look smooth? I mean, is there any other detail about it that you remember? And also, some of the kids thought it was floating a little bit off the ground. Did you happen to notice that as well?
I didn't notice it floating. I did notice it, and I noticed flashing lights at first. I think there were some very interesting maybe patterns. I don't know if they were seams per se, but they were patterns, and I don't really know how to describe them, but they were a lot darker than the color of the craft itself. But they were like some form of patterns on like the top half of the craft, if that makes sense.
Wow, that's really, really fascinating. Now, how were your fellow schoolmates? Did anyone like absolutely lose it, or was everyone maintaining calmness through this whole thing?
Decorum? No, people started crying after a while, because panic, you know, if you think of like, you see so few people gather in an area, it's not so much of a big deal. Then more people come, and then everybody's confused by what they're looking at because we don't understand what we're looking at. And then one person started crying, and then it just took off from there. And I think that's when I let go of Emma's hand and went to check on my brother and sister, because I was like, oh no, I'm not having them in a panic. But incidentally, that entire half of the playground where the grade 1 through grade 4s were, nobody had any experience on that half of the playground. They were playing like nothing had happened. It was almost as though we were in two separate worlds. Like we were looking at each other in a mirror, like just same day, same time, just experiencing completely different things. And the experience was happening all on this end, and nothing was happening on this end. Because my brother and sister were looking at me like, what are you talking about? We're fine. There was nobody crying on that end. And yet in the big kids' playground, panic had ensued. And that's when somebody went to call the teachers from the staff meeting.
Yeah. I know you said that time moved very, very slowly for you, but would you be able to guess about how long this whole thing may have taken place after you talked to other people?
No, not a clue. Could have been a blink of an eye, honestly, because we've spoken about it, a few of us, over the course of the last couple of years, to try and figure out this time thing. And a lot of us didn't even really realize there was this time thing that had happened to all of us until we started talking about it. And you're like, oh my gosh, yes, I remember that. And do you remember, like, did you get this feeling? And it's like, yes. So how much time do you think it was? I have no clue. Honestly, I could not tell you. It could have been a blink. It could have been 20 minutes. It could have been 30 minutes. I don't know. Break was still going on, so
yeah,
it was still during the break.
Now, as far as you know, were any of the children at all in denial of the whole thing?
I mean, not that I know of. I think there may be some people who chose not to talk about it, of course, who maybe did see something similar, something more. I have no idea. Most of the people, there are also a lot of people on the playground who did not see anything. You know, who were in our year and who were in the exact same part of the playground who did not see anything.
You talked earlier about how you think the accident you were in prior to this and also this has shaped your life. Can you talk about how this incident in particular, how it has shaped your life differently than it may have been if it didn't happen?
Sure. I mean, I think I'm continuing to learn how it's shaping my life. That's a constant learning curve, and will be. But I I think that it definitely opened up my mind to the fact that there was more than just us out there, because whatever I had seen was not of this place. It was nothing that I could connect my 11-year-old mind to. So it definitely opened up my mind in that sense, that I just became, I feel, I think I became very open-minded because I never doubted what I saw. I may not have understood it, but I never doubted it. And I knew that there was a reason that I had seen what I had seen. And so I definitely, I mean, how close-minded can you be at 11? But it forced me, I think it's definitely shaped a lot of things that happen. I always try and keep an open mind about it. And I know that anything is possible. And there's definitely more than just us out there.
Wow. Yeah. So it's giving you, there's a lot of people that think there's going to be panic in the world if the story gets out there that there's someone, and I don't think so. I think a lot of people may kind of handle it the way you have. And basically that is, we're not alone. I mean, there's a quote out there saying, either we're totally alone or there's life out there. Either way is very scary.
Yeah, right.
Like
well, and I mean, in terms of like chaos, we live in that already, really.
Yeah.
So it's all about perspective and how we can use this incident to connect to other people's incidences of these experiences or similar experiences or incidences that are happening more recently or have happened more recently, and understand that there's obviously a pattern here for something that we need to pay attention to. Not in a scary way, but in a way of understanding.
Do you think it had any type of impact on your dreams or intuitive abilities?
Yes, I
Wow.
do actually. I mean, I understand that it did now. I don't think that I did for a number of years. It took me a while. I am somebody who I like to help people. I like to be there for anyone other than myself, really, which is not always the healthiest. But anybody that is not fully represented, which is what I feel that experience was. It was like, I don't know what you are, so I don't understand who you are. So I'm going to work toward understanding more. And that's what I strive to do that on a daily basis. My education has been in, human rights, in international relations, and how we can work together and figuring out how working together helps people. So I definitely think that it's helped with that. In terms of my intuition, yes, I think so as well, in varying degrees for many things. Yeah.
Wow, that's great. Now, when this happened, how long would you say it was before people started talking about the possibility of being visited by an extraterrestrial as the answer to what you had no idea of? What happened?
I think it was gosh, I don't know. It may have even been the first interview, which I don't remember who it was. I think the first interview was either SABC. It wasn't ZBC. ZBC was not the first, because I remember I had an aunt that lived there, and she saw me on the news or wherever it was broadcast, and she called my mom and said, what's going on? And so I was like, oh gosh, yeah, I guess I should probably tell my parents about this. And that's when I told them. But yeah, it was interesting that our own local crew was not the first ones on site. It's been so long. We were interviewed by so many people. I don't remember who all of them were, but that was definitely one of the crew that I was referring to earlier, Martin, in the sense that, some of the naysayers, that I felt like they were just there to do a job. They were not interested in really what we had to say, nor really believed us. Because I think if you're grilling an 11-year-old or 11-year-olds and younger to that degree, I mean, goodness.
Right. How long would you say I know the time thing you were talking about, but did the teachers actually go outside and try to see what everyone was seeing? Was there ever that point, or had it vanished?
let me see if I remember this. They took some time to come out, whether they were finishing up what they were doing or they just thought, oh, you know, these kids are overreacting. I don't know. But I think it took one teacher or some teachers maybe like stepping out to see what was going on the playground. And then they saw that, you know, panic, that people were crying. It was just not a normal day on the playground. I don't know exactly how long it took, maybe 10 minutes for them to come, maybe 15. I honestly don't know. I know they did not come out immediately because the people that went to call them called them, told them, came back to the playground and said, we told them, but they don't believe us.
To know, what would you say if someone said that these beings were from another dimension? Has anybody ever brought that up to you?
What would I say?
Yeah, what would you say to that? Yeah.
I would say maybe. I know they're not from here, so they're definitely from somewhere else. You know, where that is, I don't know. But I think that that's a good way to start a conversation.
Yeah.
And, you know, start a dialogue about that. So. And
that was in my opinion, that was a perfect answer. You talked earlier about it was a Christian school mostly, right?
Yes.
Did that apparently affect your religion or anyone that you know, like to all of a sudden think there was extraterrestrial?
Not that I know of. I can only speak for myself. And I mean, when we leave primary school, you're 12. So I don't know if you've fully formed what you think yet at all. I highly doubt it. But for me, it did not. I think it didn't really correlate with anything I'd been taught, but I wouldn't say it necessarily went against it entirely. But I also have my own sense in my own mind to deconstruct what that means to me and what my upbringing means to me, and find a median in between. I don't think that, you know, one determines the other. I think they're completely separate.
Okay, so in the years of, let's say, suppression, or the years that you didn't want to think about it, did you have like certain triggers, like something like all of a sudden you'd see, you know, a movie coming out about extraterrestrials or something like that? Did you have some things that would like bring you back to the reality of what happened?
Yes, there were always people asking me at school.
Really?
When I went to when I went to high school, there were maybe 3 people from my primary school, 3 or 4 people from my primary school who were in the same grade as me when we moved to high school, and we went to the same high school together. So that story definitely spread. Also, you know, you don't all go to the same high school, so people kind of ask what primary school you went to, and people would be like, oh, Ariel, that's where you saw the UFOs, and then it would be like, wait, weren't you on TV? Or they'd ask, did you see the UFOs, or what did you see? So they were reminders over the courses of the years. Yeah.
Did you?
Quite a few.
A lot of times, did you always answer honestly, or did you say you didn't want to talk about it?
I always answered honestly. If somebody asked me what I saw, I would tell them. If they asked me if I saw UFOs, I would say, well, I saw something not from here. If they wanted to have a conversation about how I hadn't seen what I had seen, I would just end the conversation and walk away, because I had no capacity for that. Like, I was not going to have my own experience diminished by someone else's inability to even have an open mind to try to understand what my experience was, while like wrapping it under some falsification of the fact that they cared, because they really didn't.
I know how kids are and how they like to touch anything. I'm surprised no one tried to touch the being or the craft.
You know, there's something about those tree trunks as a boundary, Martin. I'm telling you, people, we took that very seriously. Nobody crossed that boundary at all, whether it was your arm or your foot or your toe. I also think that because a lot of us were unsure of what we were looking at, we just knew that we were looking at something unique and different. You're also less likely to, you know, reach out. I certainly was. Curiosity was not going to try and kill my cat that day. I was not reaching out and trying to be like, you know, what is this? But I can only speak for myself. I think just the general feeling and sense on the playground, that probably makes sense, is that, okay, we know we're looking at something, we don't know what it is, So we're just gonna observe from afar, which I think incidentally is what they did as well, because none of them came into the playground, not a single one.
Wow.
At least none that I saw, and none of the people that I am still in contact with when we talk about it remember the beings being in the actual boundary of the playground. Yes.
Going all the way back to the description of the being, you know, because you're probably going to be the only one I've ever talked to that actually saw a being like that so close. And you know, I shouldn't say that because a lot of people are saying they're, you know, experiencers and see things, but say
Sure.
you were surrounded by witnesses. When I talked to Travis Walton, you know, he told me the eyes were the most, you know, incredible thing. The eyes were the scariest thing of them all. Do you feel the same way? Were the eyes like big and black, like?
Yes, yes. And I can see the picture that I drew vividly in my mind. The eyes were very, very captivating. Nothing like I'd ever seen before, and incredibly magnetic, which is, it almost felt like it took effort for me to break that gaze, which again, you kind of feel if time is slowing down, if that is in fact what happened. I don't know. But they were very big and very dark and very, very, just, they were captivating. You know, it was one of those where you couldn't look away.
What you could tell someone out there who's maybe experienced this that doesn't want to talk about it or suppressing it or would never want to report it, do you feel as though you could help them through something like that?
I mean, I think that I would definitely encourage the person to talk about it if they wanted to. I think it also takes the right person to break that in. You have to feel, I almost feel that if it hadn't have been Randall, I may not be having this conversation with you.
Sure.
So the approach that the person that you're trying to have this breakthrough conversation with is really, really important. I also think that it's important to recognize that your experience is as important as you make it. And if you want something to be spoken about, if you want to have better understanding, perhaps talking about it in some way, shape, or form is a good idea. I would never begin to suggest what that is because everybody deals with things differently. And I'm not a psychologist at all, so I don't pretend to have this fantastic understanding of the human brain. But I do know that with experiences come processes, right? We all process things very differently. My goal would be to not discredit this person's experience, but to also have them think, whether it's first in journaling or in making little sound bites about what their experience is, to help them understand what that could mean. And that may eventually help them talk about it. Because I don't think that I don't think it's a fluid thing. It most certainly was not for me. I can only speak for myself. But like I said, sometimes those years of suppression or the time of suppression is actually beneficial to you to realize that you're still thinking about this thing really did still happen. You still have dreams about it. You have other dreams about it. You have all these other things that have happened in your life that, okay, this is not going away. What can I do about it? What am I supposed to do about it? And I really do think that it's a transitional thing.
Yeah. Thanks so much. And I got to tell you, you're one of my favorite guests. This was really great.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yes. And I hope your future is as bright as I think it's going to be.
Thank you. I hope so too. I think it will be.
Yes. All right. You take care.
Well, thank you. Have a good night. Bye-bye.